Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. I'm Andrew Musgrove and today joined by John Gibson. Later in the show, we look ahead to the trip to Brentford on Saturday. But first, we're going to reflect on that roller coaster of a game against Liverpool on Wednesday night. 3-3 at St James's Park with Newcastle United leading twice. I'm probably feeling, like I do, that they should have arguably got all 3 points against the best side in the world right now. Goals from Alexander Isak, Anthony Gordon, and Fabian Schär made sure that United got the point against the table toppers Liverpool. We're going to talk about it all: the goals, the effort, the commitment, the referee, and much, much more. Hit subscribe, share the pod. Let's get into it. John, you well?
Yes, I'm good. I'm still shaking from last night. It was such a brilliant game, pulsating game, a throwback to all that is good about Newcastle United. Um, because make no mistake about it, and you've said you named them as sort of the best club side in the world at the moment. Since Slot went there, I mean, they came here, they'd won 18 of his 20 games, drawn one and lost one. I mean, that record is they'd beaten the champions of England, Man City. They'd beat the champions of Spain and Europe, Real Madrid, and the champions of Germany, Bayer Leverkusen. And they come up here, and I don't think they've had a harder game all season than they had last night.
Yeah, most certainly so. And there's so much to talk about. But it's funny, isn't it? Because when we were talking about the Crystal Palace game, John, on the match preview, you mentioned that actually in some ways you were feeling more confident about the Liverpool game than
Yeah.
you were the Crystal Palace game. And I think many were. I think many subscribed to that train of thought. I certainly did. But were you expecting such a level of performance that we saw on Wednesday night?
No, I don't think I was, because I've seen how they've swept quality sides. As I say, the champions of three different countries were all swept away by them, and we know we're good. And what's a funny feeling, Andrew? And I don't want to be negative after such a wonderful game, but I come out last night and I'm walking down from St James's Park to go for my car, and my head's swirling with emotions, and I'm thrilled at what I've just seen, and it's going round and round in my mind. And by the time I got to my car, Andrew, there was a little bit of anger in there as well, because I thought, wait a minute, what happened down at Palace? We do it against Liverpool. We go to Palace, who are second bottom when we go there. We get a 1-1 draw without having a shot on goal. The game before that was West Ham. And I think, what's happening here? We being at home, we beat the likes of Arsenal and Chelsea in the League Cup. We draw with the old Manchester City. We beat before they imploded. We beat Spurs. We've now stopped the juggernaut that's Liverpool. But on the other side of the coin, we've lost at home to Brighton and West Ham, and we've drew with Bournemouth, and we've drew with Everton. We couldn't beat Bournemouth, we couldn't beat Everton, etc., etc. And I'm a bit furious because take Crystal Palace and Liverpool. In a matter of days, you couldn't get two more extremes. We couldn't have been worse at Palace and we couldn't have been better than we were against Liverpool. Yet 10 of the 11 started both games. And, there's a question to be asked for me, and I'm asking it. Do Newcastle's blue chip players who set the mood of the team, who have got the quality, who can do it, did they only play when when on the London Palladium? And if they had a smaller venue, a smaller theatre, then it's not a big enough occasion for them. I mean, the world was watching last night. We were playing this wonderful Liverpool team. It was live on telly. The world was watching, and I mean, people come out. And I was watching the old Isak and the old Gordon. It was wonderful. They were back to what they were at the very. But I didn't see them too much against Palace. I know Isak went off, but before he was off injured, and certainly not from Gordon, no against West Ham. Do these guys only play at the London Palladium and they don't play when they come up to put a social club? It concerns me a little. It makes me a little bit angry. In the elation, and I don't want to stop the elation, and nobody's more elated than me. It was wonderful. But why on earth do we at least not give that same endeavour and lung bursting wish to have success. Should that not be given every game?
No, certainly so. And we've spoke about it plenty of times, this kind of mentality issue against the lesser sides and against the sides who sit back and invite Newcastle United on. And that is the big question, going forward. Brentford don't have too much of the ball, even though they're brilliant at home. Leicester, we don't know what's going to happen there with Ruud van Nistelrooy settling in. He might actually play attacking football, which would be really daft from his point of view. We want that to happen so Newcastle can do what they did last night against Liverpool and play that counter-attacking, fast-flowing stuff. But I guess when we were asking that question, what I did see last night, and we didn't see a lot of it, but I thought, especially in the first half, there were times when Liverpool sat really deep and Newcastle had to have more of the ball than I think they were maybe expecting, but they didn't look uncomfortable with it. They were passing it about. Now, if you look at the possession stats, Liverpool still had a lot more possession in that first half, but Newcastle still had moments of that game, especially in the opening 45, where they had to be patient and they had to just pass it around and wait for the wait for the right moments. And they did it really well. And my hope is that they can take that into games, maybe like Brentford on Saturday, maybe against Leicester the week after, where they are going to have the majority of possession. And the bottom line is, John, they have to, because I remember sitting here a few weeks ago after Newcastle beat Chelsea and Arsenal and people screaming, we're back, we're back. And I was saying, well, let's just calm it down here because you're only as good as the next game. And then Newcastle had the international break, West Ham and Palace followed. So again, I'll say the same thing. In isolation last night, brilliant, wonderful, one of the best games we've seen in recent times. And we've seen a lot of great games. One of the games that I think that people will remember for a very long time. Loads to be positive about. But if we're sitting here waiting for Villa on Boxing Day and Newcastle, are heaven forbid out of the cup and they've lost against Leicester or they've only picked up one win between Leicester and Brentford in the league last night, doesn't really matter in many ways. So that's the kind of one negative thing. He has to find the solution. It's not easy, but I saw enough to suggest that maybe he could do it. And look, people might say, why are you being negative? But it's a valid question, isn't it?
It is. It is. And, I think it's more. I mean, I've banged on, and you have, and lots of other people have, and it's absolutely correct. Newcastle like to counter. They're the best when they're countering, because they can do the pace with teams coming onto them. And when they're throwing the ball by, in quotes, supposedly inferior sides and told, right, break us down, we're not good at it. But I go beyond that as well. In that first half, when you were saying we have a lot of the ball and we had to be patient and we had to pass it around and we did that, but we did it at pace, etc. I don't think it's just about tactics that teams were okay if we're countering, but if we're possession based, we're not so good. That does come into it. But also, I think it's in players' minds. They were up for it last night. They were up from it from the minute they walked down the tunnel at the start of the game. Now, tell me, were they up for it at Palace before a ball was kicked? Not in the same. I would suggest certain individuals, people like Dan Burn, will always give you what he gives you. The good, the bad, the ugly. Dan's Dan, and bless him, I'm thankful for that because I know where I am with Dan. He's got the big heart, the old frying pan bit, etc., etc. And you know what you'll get with Dan. I'm not certain what I'll get with some of these players. When I get the best, I sit back with a cigar in a deck chair and I'm having the most wonderful time of my life. And then we play another side where we ought to pick up 3 points. And what I see is what worries me. It's not just tactically, Andrew, it's that did they give as much as last night? And I know the big occasion with all of us, whatever we're doing, a big occasion, we will always react to it. It always brings the best out. It's human nature. But the good sides go to um, Paris. The good sides play West Ham at home. West Ham before us were hopeless, and after us have been hopeless. But they beat us 2-0. And I'm only saying this because of Geordie Hart, like all of us, and I want it to be not knee jerk. I don't want it to be depths. You see, we had the three great games, didn't we, when we beat Arsenal, Chelsea up here in the League Cup and Forest. Then we have the two which were absolutely hopeless, which are against West Ham and Palace, and now we're up again. But I'm sick of the seesaw. I'm, I, I mean, if all I'm asking the boys to do is to give us the honest willingness to go the full cause on behalf of Newcastle, because if they do, these players are good enough to get results. I mean, it was a joy to sit and watch Isak last night. I mean, a worldy goal. He led the line in a way that makes you just think, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Doesn't everybody wish that in? And Gordon, suddenly the outside left, had forced himself into the England team. Now that's a joy to watch. But I'm asking you, what will we do at Brentford? At Brentford, will we play the badge or will we play the team? If we play the team, that team's won 6 and drawn one of their 7 home games in the Premier League, and therefore they're as good as Liverpool. They've actually got a better home record than Liverpool because Liverpool lost at home to Forest. Brentford. So if we play the team, we'll go out with the attitude we went out with last night because the team is top notch. If we play the badge, i.e., Brentford, oh, they're a smaller club. If we play the badge, we'll be in trouble like we were with Palace and like we were with West Ham. So it's not a rant, it's not negativity. I enjoyed it so much. I want to enjoy it like that regularly. And these boys are capable, enough of them. And they set the mood, don't they? The big name players set the mood. And I thought the two lads, Isak and Gordon, went right back to their best form. They were backed by people like Tonali, who looked terrific in the middle of the field, etc., etc. Now, if we have that, we go to Brentford and we get something, despite their home record. If we play the badge, why, it's just Brentford, it's not Liverpool, it's just Brentford, it's not Arsenal, then we will get beat. So we need to get consistency in. And that, I think, apart from tactics, which obviously coming down, I think Eddie's biggest. With hindsight, I bet Eddie found it easier to get them up against Liverpool than he did in the dressing room before the Palace game.
Yeah, but that's the issue, isn't it? Because as you say, the top sides go to these so-called inferior sides and win. That's why Liverpool are top of the league. They've beaten Southampton.
Sure.
Southampton gave them a good challenge, but Liverpool came out on top. So that's what takes you up to the next level. And I don't think for one moment anyone would begrudge you, and I hopefully not me, for walking away from St James's Park last night on a high. But as you say, 5 minutes, 10 minutes stuck in traffic, and you're thinking, oh, where was that against Crystal Palace? Where was that against West Ham? Because look how congested the table is. And that's one reason why Eddie Howe is going nowhere, because 2 or 3 wins get you up the league. But also you can't help but look and think, oh man, like beat West Ham, beat Crystal Palace, draw against Liverpool, you're second in the league. So those frustrations are totally fair and totally just. And I think Eddie Howe will also be probably scratching his head thinking, okay, how do we transfer this over to those so-called lesser sides? It is a solution that I don't know what it is, but that's why he gets paid the big bucks. I want to talk about the midfield, John, because you've mentioned Tonali and Bruno. There was plenty of talk about it before the game. I'll hold my hands up, and I said on the match preview with Birdie that I thought Longstaff would come in. Birdie said he thought Tonali would drop out, and I said I wouldn't be surprised at that, although I wouldn't have been my call to do that. In the end, Howe went with Tonali, Bruno, and Joe Linton, dropping back into the middle. And I thought all three put in a great shift, but Bruno and Tonali, for me, were just standout. They were my 2 man of the matches. As good as Isak was, as good as Fabian Schär was, I thought Bruno and Tonali were just absolutely brilliant. And like the Arsenal game, John, like the Chelsea game, where we were all, high as a kite, we've been here before, because there's been 1 or 2 games where you go, ooh, that looks good with them two. Let's just calm it down, because I think if we can get the consistent run of games where we see performance like that last night with them two in the middle, then hey, that midfield could be unstoppable. It should be unstoppable. Is it all about consistent run of games coming? Is that the key to it?
The whole of football's about consistency. Football is built on consistency. You win nothing if you're a yo-yo side. If you live life on a pogo stick, you don't win anything. you're flattered to deceive. You have a sensational win one week and then an inexplicable defeat another week. That happens. Now, on paper, when we were starting this season, Andrew, and we knew that Tonali was coming back from a 10-month ban, on paper, the midfield that was expected to rip up the Premier League were the three that played last night. Two Brazilian internationals and Tonali, an Italian international. They were the three on paper. But let us remember, and you've just picked out Bruno and Tonali last night, who were both absolutely terrific. I agree with you completely. But it was only the last press conference that Eddie Howe was having to field questions about whether Tonali and Bruno could play together. And he said, yes, they can, but we've got to sort something out. And I talked about, previous managers. Joe Harvey managed to play Anderson and Eiley together when they did the same job in midfield. Keegan managed to play Ferdinand and Shearer when they were both supposed to be target men. And we saw a glimpse last night of how they can play together. But I mean, I thought that probably Longstaff would come in, and then I was talking in a pub just before the game, Andrew, talking to Newcastle fans, and I suggested that it might well be Murphy to come in, and everybody went, Murphy? Goodness gracious, why? And I said, well, two reasons. Well, three actually. One is the manager likes him. He always tends to turn to Murphy in certain occasions. Second is we actually haven't got an outside right, a pucker one, because Miggy's obviously just sitting in the departure lounge waiting for January for his plane to take off, and it's just where's it going? So we haven't got an outside right. Harvey's an outside left. Gordon's an outside left. Joe Linton, if he plays wide's an outside left. We haven't got an outside right. So I thought he could use Murphy because he likes him, but also because it puts the beast back in the midfield, Joe Linton, playing again. I'm not suggesting he had a wonderful game. I'm just in the theory before the game. Against a side that might run us in midfield and run all over us. And that happened. Now, I think the subtle difference for me last night was that to a certain extent, Tonali was released. He played the centre where he was much better. He played the centre rather than on one of the wings, on one of the flanks of the midfield three. He played the centre and he was released to go forward, not to play as a six just. And I think he looked so much better for that. And the two of them can play together, but they've got to stay disciplined. And I think that applies more to Bruno. And by disciplined, I don't mean about getting booked. I'm talking about disciplined in doing the job you're doing. And I think you can. The third reason why I thought would all change, I thought Willock was particularly strangely poor down at Crystal Palace, and I thought his position was vulnerable. It was either going to be Longstaff or Joe Linton in his position.
Well, it's funny because I was going to say the same thing about Bruno being released and being able to roam a little bit more, because I thought he was unbelievable last night. 2 assists. But what I want to talk about first off is just like, I thought it was his best performance since taking the armband in terms of giving what a captain needs to give. So from a football point of view, great on the ball, John, helping Tonali and Big Joe to win that midfield battle. But it was, obviously going forward where he was particularly impressive. He was allowed to get a bit further forward, picking the pass, and even having a shot inside the box, which he probably should have done a little bit better with, but we'll not hold it against him. But like I say, it was from the captain and leadership point of view, which really stood out for me, because it's the first time that I've seen him really step into that role. There's been plenty of questions about whether it was a bad decision to give him the armband. Was it just to keep him happy, to keep him here? And has Eddie Howe made a rod for his own back sort of thing? But there was a moment last night, just after Liverpool got the equaliser, and all of a sudden Newcastle are panicked, disorganised, everything's gone to pot, they've lost the shape. The cross comes in and Nick Pope's in absolute no man's land. Gakpo's at the back post. He heads it across the box, and Núñez on the line misses it. I don't know how he's missed it, but thankfully he does. And you can feel the nerves in the crowd, and you can see the nerves on the pitch. And Bruno goes over and he starts gesturing. He just calmed down everybody, and then he puts his fingers to his head. He says, think about it, And then you've got the second goal for Liverpool. Joe Linton gives the ball away. Liverpool go up the other end and they score. And again, he's doing the same thing. And then he goes over to Joe Linton. He just kind of gives him a hug and just says, okay. It's okay. Let's move past it. Let's get on with it. And then he G's up the crowd. And it might sound simple, and you might say to me, John, well, that's what a captain should do. But that's not what he's been doing. And I think back to when Trippier was captain, that's what you saw. You saw those little things, those little movements, those little hand gestures. And for me last night, it was the perfect captain's performance from Bruno. And I really hope that it's the first step to doing that week in, week out, because if he can play like he did last night in terms of what he did on the ball, fantastic. But if he can also do that in terms of being a captain and really stepping up like Trippier did, like Lascelles does, then it's what we need. And it's what we've been missing, in my opinion, as well.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair comment. That's his best game as a captain. Just looking at the captaincy as opposed to his ability on the ball, that was his best game. He's not what I'd call an automatic standout captain, where you would automatically say, well, he's got the armband and all, he's a leader. I mean, Trippier was totally that. And if you go back far enough, people like Bob Moncur epitomised that at Newcastle United. A leader of men. Joe Harvey, a leader of men. They were true captains. This is not a natural captain in terms of organising people, doing things like those guys did. He more or less got it as the most valuable player on the park at the time, because you wouldn't think Anthony Gordon or Isak are captain material. And they are wonderful players, but they're not captain material. And you want to, because Bruno's passionate and he loves Newcastle and he had this rapport with the fans. That's why he's handed the job. I didn't think he looks a natural captain, but he did it so well last night. And this was the first time we saw him do the captaincy well, and the first time we saw a link with Tonali where they were both clever. You're right, they both went forward, but they didn't go forward together. One went forward and one didn't. And one, in the same way as Joe Harvey in the old days, where Stan Hansen and Jim Hiley made it work. They are both naturally forward players, but they didn't go forward together. One sat when the other went, but it was just who felt he was right on the ball to go, and the other one automatically dropped in. It was a bit like that with Bruno and Tonali last night, and it was good to see. But I tell you what, they've set themselves their own high standard. They've set themselves the benchmark. Tonali has, Bruno has as skipper, Isak has. Gordon has. Gordon wants to play outside left. I'm sure he probably had a quiet word in Eddie's ear and said, listen, Gaffer, I played outside right and centre forward for you down at Crystal Palace, and the team didn't perform at all. I'm playing Liverpool. I come from Liverpool. I'm England's outside left. Any chance of playing me at outside left? And once you do that, it's who plays outside right. And that becomes Murphy because he trusts him more. But the standards have been set, and now all I'm asking is consistency. And I'm not asking for consistency in terms of form, because you can't actually guarantee that it just happened. But you can be consistent in terms of attitude, in terms of desire, in terms of wanting to bust a gut to make something happen. We showed that in abundance last night, and great. I'm so thrilled. We didn't show it at Palace or against West Ham here. So please show it again at Brentford. If you show some consistency, we'll be all right. If we
Yeah.
don't, we'll be what we are. And by the way, we're still 10th in the table. So if we don't show consistency, we'll end up around 7 to 10. If we show consistency, we'll be what we're half expected to be. And it isn't negative. You're so thrilled about last night. And you've got so much belief that in Tonali and in Bruno and in Isak and in Gordon, you've got players capable of matching the best if they bring not just their best game to the table, but their best attitude to the table.
Yeah, 100%. I tweeted out last night that if they can find that solution to going up against those lesser sides, then they'd be absolutely flying. Tonali, as we said, John, brilliant. I think everything about his game shone through. You could see why they spent so much money on him. Strong, good in the battle, good runner, can pick a pass. Also, as you said, had the chance to get forward, and he had the first effort of the game where he's kind of just walked through 3 or 4 players before curling one. towards the bottom corner. It was a good save by the Liverpool keeper. So absolutely brilliant. I mean, should the debate about him being in the midfield from the off, is it over now? Should it just stop?
It's never over with Newcastle because we just need a bad performance at Brentford and it'll all come back again. But it ought to be over. He's quality. Newcastle thought he was quality. That's why they paid 52 million. And he is quality. You know what, for me, Andrew, is a sign of a good player? Small things. You talked about when he went down and clipped that ball and great save, etc. But small things. When he receives the ball in a bad position where he shouldn't actually receive it, the passer shouldn't give it to him because he's surrounded by two defenders on him, etc., etc. There's a better outlet on either side, but the ball goes into Tonali. You know what? He never looks panicked, and good players don't. He looks as if he's got that extra second. You might think, I didn't want it here, pal. What are you giving it to me for with these two binders? But he just, boom, gets his backside in, holds him off, lays a little ball off, turns round and we're attacking. Good players have that split second. He doesn't often look flustered. And that's a sign of a good player. When you get it in bad situations, but you're not flustered and the move continues. And he's got that. And he's got to be encouraged. He's had a tough 10 months. He's had a tough time here. He didn't want to leave AC Milan. He come here. He couldn't speak the language. He was getting into the side. His body language wasn't good. He looked like a well-smacked backside. He had everything poorly going for him. And all of a sudden, that 10 months, he felt the love of the fans. He felt the love of the club. He wanted to do things. He's been allowed to do it at international level, and boy, has he prospered. And he's wanted to do it here, and he's just been held back that little bit. And okay, Eddie's got his reasons, and Eddie's the gaffer. But he's ready now to be released. We've got to take, Eddie's got to take him to one side now and say, listen, pal, we paid 52 million for you. You're showing us that you're a 52 million player. We are going to believe in you now. You're going to play in that midfield. It doesn't mean that Bruno's out or anybody else is out. But he's got to be told, we do believe in you. You know, you're not just making up the numbers here in a star with Italy. We believe in you.
Well, Eddie Howe was asked about the midfield three debate after the draw with Liverpool. So this is what he had to say. We'll listen to him, John, and then I'll get your thoughts on it. So here's Eddie Howe asking or answering the question rather on the midfield three choices.
You love the midfield three debate, don't you? And I understand it because it's an interesting thing because you've got three outstanding players. For me, with our midfield, we've got six outstanding midfield players to pick from, and getting the balance right of those six is very difficult because they all have different skills. I've gone back to it because I think it can work, the three of them together. I think we've obviously changed the dynamic of how it lines up, and there's strengths and weaknesses to that. We're seeing Bruno in a different position. I thought he played well today. Sandro, I think, has been excellent the last two games as a six. Real competition for places. But three outstanding players that we need to get the best out of.
And probably, John, the last word of Eddie Howe there is the most important one, or the last sentence there. You know, three very good players that we need to get the best out. He also mentions that he's got six players to choose from. So you've got the three who started last night, Longstaff, Willock, and Yushun are the ones, Lewis Miley, that he's talking about. So great to have those options, but definitely this last sentence is what I'm focusing on there. You know, three great players, as you said, on paper, start of the season. Those three that were the first choice, ripping up the Premier League, hasn't happened consistently yet, but it needs to, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, he's ever the diplomat. He's wonderful, Eddie, when you ask him a question, because how we on top of the league in Liverpool's position and 7 points clear when everybody's wonderful and we're doing wonderful. And I mean this nicely, bless him. But I mean, he is terrific at answering. He obviously puts an awful lot of thought in it. He knows the questions that's going to come and he'll answer it nice. And it's wonderful for the dressing room because they listen to this when they get home. They bring it up on screen, and the boss is not saying anything about anybody. It's negative. I mean, if we've got six great midfield players, how the heck we on Liverpool's coattails at the moment? I don't know. And we've got six individually talented players. that weren't dovetailing. Now they've got a dovetail. And he's right, Tonali's looked good. He's played 6, which is a central position, but also it's not a rigid 6. Last night he came out from 6 on occasions when it was right, and then Bruno would just tuck in that little bit. They have been playing different sort of roles. And really, unless you've got Joe Linton playing wide somewhere. In the only wide position he's comfortable in is outside left, and he's not going to get in there if Gordon's playing. So, your midfield 3 are going to be the 3 we've been talking about, because Joe Willock, after having stuttery injuries, etc., hasn't hit consistency whatsoever yet. He has the legs, he has the potential, he gets you up the park quick, etc., but would you really trust and risk him at the moment? He fades a lot in games. He's not, you've got to go with these 3 and hope that. And these were the original 3, I would think, in the summer when we knew Tonali was going to come back, that we would have expected to be Newcastle's 3. Work has had to be done on it. And because it worked so brilliantly last night, doesn't mean it'll work every game. But work's got to continue on that, and the potential is there, because they are 3 quality players. He's absolutely right on that. The three internationals, for goodness sake.
Yep, fingers crossed we can see more of what we saw against Liverpool. We've briefly talked about Alexander Isak and obviously the goal that he scored. He had one ruled out for offside. He should have had a penalty as well, because in the moment he goes down, John, I thought it was a penalty, and then getting back and seeing the replay, I'm certain it was a penalty. And we'll talk about that later, because I've got a big rant about VAR coming up, so we'll store that towards the end of the show. But on Alexander Isak, he looked like the Alexander Isak of old. He was running the show. The way he was running through the defenders, dragging them out wide and coming in. His footwork was superb, and of course the goal. I mean, you know a few of Newcastle United's former number 9s quite well. They would have been very proud of that effort, wouldn't they?
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, he is top draw. He is proper quality. We've been told that Van Dijk is one of the greatest centre halves in the world, and he sat him down on his pants. He sat him down on his pants and took it around and clipped it in the back of the net. I mean, when he says go, he's stupendous, because he's got the silky skills of a midfielder, and he's got the rapier finish of a number 9, and he combines it all in one. And when he says go, he is absolutely top draw. The last man you would sell under any circumstances, because it's hard enough to find number 9s. Never mind the number 9, it's so pleasing on the eye and has so many tricks and so much pace and such a finishing ability as he's got. So you've got to keep people like him. It was absolutely terrific. I almost knew in the first 2 minutes which Isak were going to get, which Gordon were going to get, and which Newcastle United were going to get. But I almost knew in the first few minutes at Crystal Palace it was going to be the other Newcastle. We have got to be consistent about this, and this fella is top draw. This fella is a proper number 9, and we ought to be very grateful to have him, very appreciative, and don't let him go. Please don't let him go. I've seen Newcastle sell Supermac. I've seen them sell other players in the past, like Beardsley and Gascoigne and Waddle, and no good comes of it. And the last fella you sell is your number 9, because he's the hardest guy to replace.
Yeah, certainly so. We will talk about that penalty incident in a little while. But Gordon, he got his goal. He should have had one in the first half, straight at Keller. But again, another player who looked like the player of old. And I thought it was really important that he did get the goal after he missed what was, let's be honest, a bit of a sitter in the first half. And the celebration was quite interesting as well, John. The kind of the chat celebration. And you wonder whether that was obviously, he's been criticised slightly. People have said, since he's got that new contract, he's not been at the level that we know he can be. He's doing it for England. Why is he not doing it for Newcastle? I mean, I think he is someone who probably is aware of the criticism and maybe more than others lets it get to him slightly. But hey, look, if he can score goals as a direct response to that criticism, then I'm all for it. It was a wonderful finish. Isak giving him the ball, and I have to admit, when he took the touch inside, John, I did scream, "What are you doing?" And then, thankfully, before I even finished the end of my sentence, he put the ball in the back of the net. Who am I to question Anthony Gordon? But a great finish for him, and another good outing for him.
Yes, he looked the player that he become after his first half season with us. Then he had that wonderful season last time round, and he is as good as that. There's only one, you boom, 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 boom. There's only one way to shut all that up, Anthony. Keep playing like that, my son. Keep putting that effort in, and everybody would. They were singing his name last night, Anthony Gordon, and the encouragement's there. The crowd love him. We love him. We want to be entertained. We don't want to sit there as if we're getting our teeth pulled out with a pair of pliers for an hour and a half. We want to sit there and enjoy it like we enjoyed last night, and that was wonderful. Wonderful to see, and it was the old guy. I mean, you know what? I look, we know the difference between Liverpool and Newcastle over a season. I mean, the first word that jumps to mind is consistency. They have it and we don't have it. But on the night as well, when I look at it, and it ended up 3-3, we led twice, and they led once, and it was a seesaw, wonderful, wonderful game. But I just thought on that journey home, when my mind was all over the shop, I just thought as well, what's the difference, Gibbo, tonight between the two sides? And there was no difference score-wise. But what's the difference? And you know what? It's that they've got an outside right and we haven't. Outside right is our problem position. They've got Mo Salah, who just scored two and made the other one. He'd had a quiet first half. Somebody come up to me at half time downstairs when I was having a cup of tea and said, Gibbo, is Salah on the pitch? I said, I want you to be careful. There's another 45 minutes to go, pal. We might find out. And I didn't know he was going to do that, but we might find out whether he's on the pitch or not. 2 goals and assist. He is now scored 15 this season and 12 assists, and he's not a centre forward. He's an outside right. He scored 15 from outside right, and Newcastle United's whole team put together has only scored 17. Now, the difference for me is that we haven't got an outside right, and they've got the best one in the world at the moment.
Yeah, who
And
might
by
not
the
even
way,
get
that was a learning curve for Hall. And I love
Yes.
Lewis, and I think he's great. That was a learning curve. That second half, because in the first half he still did wonderful things with his vision on the ball, knocking it in here, bursting forward. He ended up in the penalty area. Remember with a shot that it almost finished. I mean, it was a lovely ball to him. It almost finished. He is a wonderful, wonderful player. But it's suddenly from a very frustrating season last season, suddenly this season. He's become a regular. He's doing great. He's learned an awful lot defensively. He's become a full England international. If ever there was a feet on the ground moment for him, it was the second 45 minutes last night. Admittedly, in facing Salah, he was facing world class. But you go off from that and you say, Lewis, I might be an England national. I might be established at Newcastle United, but we never can get too big for our boots. Mo Salah, he was a bit of a handful for him.
Yeah, I thought he was very good in the first half. I thought, as you say, the second half was maybe a bit of a learning curve from. Unfortunately, at fault for one of the goals for Liverpool because he gave the ball away, didn't he? But
Yeah.
we can't really complain. He's had a brilliant few months, so he'll have moments like that. But overall, I thought he was absolutely fantastic. But yeah, Mo Salah, I mean, might not even get a new deal at Liverpool. So if Newcastle want to break the bank and somehow maybe they might have to get a few sponsors on board first before they can sign him. But I think
it's hard. I think it's hard. Yes.
Yeah,
The money
I
that I
think
give him would probably be bigger than any transfer fee would be for other people.
Yeah, I think with the outside right, obviously Murphy comes in and he was good. He had a few chances, and the chances in the first half, one off the post and one wide. He could do nothing more than what he did there. They were very well
He
hit, but it
could.
was
He could
the
have put
effort
it in
in
the
the.
back of the net. He could
Well,
have put it in
yes,
the back
but
of the net instead of around the post. But I mean, Murphy's Murphy, like I said about Dan Burn. Murphy's Murphy. You know what you'll get every game, and you'll know what that game will lack every game. But you would never particularly question Jacob's attitude to the game or desire in the way you wouldn't with Dan Burn. But I would question a few other people sometimes. They'll be up there and then they'll be down there. These are consistent guys. I mean, if we're ruthless, and we are ruthless, and you've got to be ruthless, we want Newcastle to be a top six side or a top four side. And a top four side wouldn't have Murphy as your regularly outside right. He is a very good bench player. I think he did fine against Liverpool, and I think he will start at Brentford. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't buy one in January.
Yeah, and I think the effort he had in the second half when he's raced through and he tries to put it over the goalkeeper, that was kind of the moment where I went, it's kind of the reminder of what Newcastle need in the next couple of transfer windows. And as well, Dan Burney, there was one or two long balls that he tried to play, and I think one went out of touch, and you just think in your head, going forward 2 or 3 windows time, we know what has to happen. But again, on the night, both fantastic, both brilliant. I thought Fabian Schär was standout for me. I thought Schär
was to come back for
Botman's to come back as well, of course. I thought Schär was brilliant last night. Great to see him get his goal. I thought he was controlled and he was pinging the ball about really well. One of his best performances in recent months. But I do want to just talk about the goals because, I was so frustrated. And Eddie Howe said this as well. He was frustrated at the manner that they conceded the goals because 2 of the goals have come from Newcastle giving the ball away, straight passes, and then Liverpool have just countered and finished. So, they've taken advantage of that. Bad marking as well. The Curtis Jones's goal, Tonali's, he's kept up with him, but then he's let him go at the final second, and Tonali's got to be getting across that and stopping that. So I'm just really frustrated at the way they've conceded the goals. Mo Salah had so much time in the box to score the third one. He's got 3 men around him and he still had time to turn and shoot and put in the back of the net. So I think Newcastle United will be very frustrated because really, other than a couple of saves that Nick Pope's had to make, Liverpool haven't really looked all that threatening. Nunes had that chance. Mo Salah hit the bar, but for the large part, Liverpool were kind of devoid of creativity really because of what Newcastle were doing to them. And it's just an annoyance that at least 2 of the goals have come of Newcastle's own making.
Oh yeah, we defended very, very badly on those 2 goals, and I think you had Joe Linton and Hall and Tonali not closing. There was ways that we could have stopped that happening. But again, a lot of goals that are scored by any sides anywhere in the country, you can look at a defensive mistake that helped make that happen. If you look at the match last night, our equaliser with about 7 minutes to go was because Shaw kept going and their goalkeeper let the ball go over his head thinking it's going out for a goal kick, and Shaw didn't stand there thinking it's going out for a goal kick, slid in, got his foot to it and turned it over the line. Liverpool will be saying that was a goalkeeping clanger by them for us getting the 3rd goal. And yeah, we'll take that because we give them some. So if their keeper gives us one, that's fine. But all credit to Shaw because their keeper give up an hour forward, albeit the centre half didn't. But yes, it was frustrating the way we defended. But how often are Liverpool taking for 3 goals?
Nope, not very often at all. Just a reminder, ladies and gents, this episode is brought to you by NORD VPN. You can get your specially discounted NORD VPN plan by clicking on the link in the podcast description box. And while Newcastle and Liverpool were maybe lacking a bit of safety in front of goal, if NORD VPN were running the defence, nothing would be getting leaked, not the goals or your personal details while online. So do hit that podcast description box for your very special discounted offer. Let's talk about the referee then, John, because I thought he had a very poor game for both sides, not just Newcastle. I thought he lost control of the game very early on, lack of consistency. But then we get to some very strange decisions, and Andy Madley's not helped by VAR at all. And that's where we'll start, because obviously we are going to get onto the final whistle and a little bit of discrepancy there. But we'll start with VAR and what is the point? I feel like Groundhog Day, John. I feel like we've had this discussion several times. What is the point in VAR? Because you have Virgil van Dijk wiping out Anthony Gordon and that not getting checked. You then have also Alexander Isak going down, and that looks like a penalty. And Newcastle United don't get either of the decisions.
Well, the whole situation was absolutely ludicrous. It was poor all night. I felt like you did that it was a penalty. There was an elbow. I mean, what's the point of having these things? On the penalty, they've got to go and check. VAR's supposed to do that. I don't know what went wrong. And then the whole thing was compounded by human error for me right at the end. When Newcastle are breaking away, there's a 3-on-2 situation or whatever it was, a wonderful quick throw out by Pope. We're attacking, and he blows for full time. Now, the unwritten law is you always wait until the ball's in midfield until tacks are finished, and then you blow, and that's full time. There's no advantage or disadvantage. I remember Clive Thomas, who was a very controversial referee, the top referee in Britain. He was a Welshman, got a World Cup, and Brazil got a corner. The ball coming across on the corner, he blew for full time, and the fella headed it in. There would have been a goal, and he didn't allow it. Never got another game after that. It was ludicrous, and we should have had that at the end. The display by the three guys who were the policeman of football, the referee and his two assistants, and by VAR back at the end were atrocious and were particularly bad. Yes, the Liverpool have got a case, but particularly bad in our case. And really, the end, I felt, I mean, it just compounded everything. We got the whole crowd booing off, quite understandably, the referee and his two assistants. And it sounded like, it was boos and Newcastle had just put on a magnificent game and rescued the match and got a 3-3 at the end. Of course, the boos weren't for us, but it wasn't the sound we expected on the final whistle. And we could have had a 4-3. We could have had a wonderful 4-3 with Liverpool, but this time on our behalf, if he'd let that attack go instead of them winning 4-3. Very bad taste in the mouth, but I prefer to remember the good points, but the bad points were very, very frustrating. And I think, and I know I'm biased, of course I'm biased, you're biased, Eddie Howe's biased, but I think they were wrong. The decisions were wrong. And that last one was just absolutely ludicrous.
Yeah, couldn't have put it better myself. We'll just quickly talk about Brentford on Saturday then. Great record
Yes.
at home, John. Unbelievable, as you say. The best team at home. They lost 3-1 to Aston Villa on Wednesday night. You can't pick up a win for love nor money away from home. But as we say, down at the G-Tech, they're just an absolute different beast. But Newcastle, you suspect it'll be the same starting 11.
I would expect that, yes.
Yeah. Good, going high spirits and as good as Brentford are at home. Liverpool were brilliant and Newcastle went toe to toe with them. So can't underestimate Brentford, but Newcastle should be going to this game thinking, right, we can end their home record.
They should. Well, yeah, they should. But I mean, the royal we, that's not just me and you, but 50-odd thousand Geordies, we don't know what we're going to get. I remember sitting before the West Ham game at home when we won those 3 on the trot against Arsenal, Chelsea, and Nottingham Forest, and it was just how many we score against West Ham. We lose 2-0. Before the game last night, the massive fear was, is this lot going to duff us big time because of the way we've played at Palace? And we were totally magnificent. Now, are we going to see Jekyll or Hyde on Saturday? I mean, we don't know. Ironically, this Brentford team, I mean, they've got the best home record in the Premier League, and they've got the second worst away record. The Raging Bulls at home and Pussycats away. I mean, they've got no wins away, 1 draw and 6 defeats. Second worst. I'm only mentioning that because a fortnight afterwards, they're due appear in the League Cup. Now, in theory, they should win the game down there, and we should win the game up here, which is a little bit like happened with Chelsea over the 2 games, Premier League and the Carabao Cup. Now, as we said, or I said right at the top of this podcast, it's what are we going to do? Are we going to play the badge of the team? because if we play the team, we should be okay because we'll go with the attitude we had against Liverpool. If we play the badge, i.e., this is just Brentford, then we're in big trouble. And really, there's a lot of questions going to be answered. And 10 minutes into the game, if you and me did a podcast down at Brentford, 10 minutes into the game, we'd know exactly what was going to happen because we'll have seen how we started. It's I'll be furious if we go back to producing a Palace performance. I'll be furious if we produce a Liverpool performance. We don't get beat.
Well, I think the key thing, isn't it, just to create some chances away from home, and then if you do, make sure you take them. I think defensively, it's going to be an excellent battle with the very talented midfield and forward line that they've got down at Brentford. But the defense has largely been all right, give or take a few individual errors. So not too concerned there. I think Lewis Hall up against Brian and Burmo would be a fantastic battle. Wissers, doing very well. Another man who's catching the eye. So that's going to be a fascinating battle. It's just about Newcastle United taking risks and taking a gamble and being creative, like they did against Liverpool. It's going to be a different challenge because I suspect Newcastle will have more of the ball. So again, you say that and you fear that, but it's something they're just going to have to get used to. So there's no time like the present. So fingers crossed, John, they can pick a win up on Saturday. Although I'm not overly confident at it that they will do because Brentford are brilliant at home. But I'm going to go for a draw as a nice foundation, and hopefully they can pick up all 3 points. What are you going for?
Yeah, I'm going for exactly the same. We've got to remember, we're low in a snake's belly after Palace, and we're now marching on Europe because of the display against Liverpool. But we've got to remember that we've still just took 2 points out of the last 9, and we're still 10th in the table. We've got to improve that. There's no way we can allow it to become 2 points out the last 12 by getting beat down there, and that can happen if we aren't up to scratch. And they're due a defeat at home. They're not as good as the home record shows, and they're not quite as bad as their away record shows. So there's some levelling off. And I said that before we played at Forest. I said Forest might be right up there on our podcast. Forest might be right up there, but they've got to be riding for a fall because they're not as good as their league position suggests. And we won comfortably 3-1 there in the end. This lot aren't as good as their home form suggests. And they're going to come a cropper at home at some time. And why should it not be against us? I don't think we'll get beat. We'll draw or we'll win.
Well, hopefully the record does crumble at the hands of Eddie Howe and Newcastle United. Thank you to you guys for watching and listening. Thanks, John, as always, for popping on to the podcast. You know what to do. Give a thumbs up, share the pod, hit that link in the podcast description box as well for your discount offer on your NORD VPN plan. And for myself and John, we'll see you guys next week.